And if you didn't already think the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan was a strategic blunder, have a look at this. The United States has left behind $85 billion worth of cutting-edge military equipment. That means the Taliban and their allies now have in their arsenal 22,000 Humvees, 64,000 machine guns and 16,000 pairs of night vision goggles. Add to that list 33 Black Hawk helicopters worth around $6 million each and 4 C-130 Hercules aircraft. For his analysis and updates, I'm joined from Melbourne by the foreign editor of The Australian, Mr Greg Sheridan. Greg, I think we can hazard a guess that the Taliban won't be using their new arsenal to promote peace and prosperity. As a comparison, they've got 33 Black Hawks now in Afghanistan, US Black Hawks. We have 39 in Australia, so they're on the par with our ADF. This just highlights, doesn't it, how chaotic the withdrawal was, because I would have assumed this sort of kit would have been destroyed.
Well, you're absolutely right, Peter. This is just staggering. When you add all that stuff together, the Taliban is now substantially better equipped land force than Australia has. I mean, I think we waste money on our land force because they're of no relevance to our maritime challenge from China. But, you know, a friend of mine, Rich Armitage, had the job of evacuating the South Vietnamese Navy in 1975. And the purpose of the evacuation, although it ended up saving about 25,000 Vietnamese, but the actual purpose of the evacuation was to make sure the North Vietnamese never got hold of the South Vietnamese Navy. Now, this cluster omni-shambles that Biden has produced is of staggering historic proportions, because a month before the fall of Kabul, he said there was no chance that Kabul would fall. Now, if he thought that, he was the stupidest strategic analyst in the world. Then, after Kabul fell, he said, well, it was always going to be chaos when America withdrew. Well, if it was always going to be chaos, then why did he leave $85 billion worth of American equipment behind? Now, the Taliban aren't smart enough to operate this equipment very effectively, but they've got lots of friends in Iran and Pakistan and so on who will be able to operate this equipment, who will be able to reverse engineer this equipment. There are all kinds of American technology secrets that they'll get out of it. They could just sell it on to regional partners. And insofar as this equipment is useful in counterinsurgency, it will empower the Taliban against any Afghan who's brave enough to raise his hand against them.
Yeah, we saw some imagery the last couple of days of Taliban just going around the apron of an airport in a Black Hawk. They couldn't lift it off the ground, but they could certainly manoeuvre it around. People, look, it's there, don't worry about it, they can't do anything with it. That's not the point. You hit upon the point there. Iran or China, others will get the drones, some of this equipment. They will now see the internal workings and the secrets of some of the interconnectability of all of this armoury. That's a disturbing part. And of course, over the weekend, we heard that the US government had passed to the Taliban lists of people that they wanted to be allowed access to the airport to be flown out to safety. Of course, they hand over these lists to the Taliban thinking that they're going to usher these people onto the aircraft. Of course, they're not. It then becomes kill lists. These are biometric data lists. It's just extraordinary. Now they have given them material to target people that were friendly to the allies in Australia and the US.
You're absolutely right, Peter, and you cannot hide from biometric data. I mean, we've heard harrowing stories of Afghan friends of the Americans and of the Australians indeed, and of the Brits, who have gone into hiding, left their houses. Their houses have been raided by Taliban forces looking to kill them, and they've gone into hiding. They will never escape. And, you know, anyone who thinks the Taliban has changed needs their heads read. The Taliban, when they came into power in 1996, made exactly the same speeches as these. They said there'll be no revenge killings. They said we'll honour the position of women and girls and all the rest of it. While they were saying that, they took the former Afghan head of government, Najibullah, who'd been granted asylum in United Nations premises. They dragged him out of his premises, castrated him, murdered him, killed him, dragged his body through the streets and hung him and his brother on a lamppost outside the presidential palace. We know what they did to women and girls. They have become, if anything, more depraved in their violence over the last 20 years. and they are filled with a lust for revenge and a determination to teach everybody else what the wages of opposing the Taliban are. Now, the American has not only given them $85 billion of equipment, which is about the size of Australia's naval shipbuilding over the next 20 years, they've also given them the means to kill the people who are vulnerable because they were friends of the Americans and the Australians. Now, I cannot in my life conceive of a worse American stuff-up, just a strategic catastrophe, than this in our lifetimes. This is much, much worse than the fall of Saigon in terms of American behaviour, and it casts terrible questions over the basic elementary competence of Joe Biden and his administration.
I think also too, in terms of Saigon, we didn't have such a fluid and concerning terror campaign against the West. I mean, this will be back to being a training camp, closely supported, I suspect, by Pakistan and others, and they will move into Europe as they have in the past, and I think that's the risk, and the United States, that the West is facing. I read an interesting article over the weekend about Bagram Airport. It's about 50 clicks outside of Kabul. It's a proper military airport, so it's easily secured. It's got 2 runways as opposed to the Kabul airport. Kabul is in the middle of an urban area. It's in a city. It's hard to secure. Why on earth wasn't the Bagram airport left operational until all of the evacuees were taken out? As I said, infinitely better to operate out of. Why did it shut down Bagram or give up Bagram a couple of months ago and try and run it all out of a city airport?
Well, that's an unanswerable question. But if you allow me to digress just for a second, I would never disagree with you, Peter, because you are 1,000,000% wise. But I'd say to you, the fall of Saigon was a strategic catastrophe for the West. I mean, it led to the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia and genocide. It led to 1.5 million South Vietnamese boat people. It led to re-education camps, and it led to a recrudescence of insurgency in Southeast Asia, and it consolidated the communist victories in Laos and Cambodia. And even today, they are Chinese clients, Laos and Cambodia. Now, we recovered from that, but that was a catastrophe. On Bagram, look, I just couldn't possibly agree with you more. The reason they didn't secure Bagram was that Biden refused to allow another 1,000 or so American troops to stay to secure Bagram. So with the tiny resources they had left, the American military said, we can either secure our diplomats or we can secure Bagram. Now, for another 1,000 troops for another 2 weeks, Biden could have kept Bagram, and they could have done a lot more to destroy the ordnance they left behind. They could have evacuated more Afghans in a more seamless way. And at Bagram, they could have provided for their own perimeter security instead of leaving that to the Taliban, who allowed a bombing which killed 170 people, including 13 American service personnel. They didn't do that because Biden has for a long time had one simple idea, that he just was going to get out of Afghanistan in a terrific scuttle. But what it raises to me, I always thought Biden was cognitively challenged and he declined and so on. A terrible choice last time, Biden versus Trump. But I thought the system around him would work well. I thought he'd appoint really good, cabinet secretaries and the whole American system. What it's shown is that his cabinet secretaries are just talking heads. No one took control of this. How did Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, allow this to happen? It shows that Austin and Blinken, the Secretary of State, they've got no traction with their own president. If they couldn't foresee this coming, they're incompetent. And if they foresaw it and couldn't talk their president out of it, then they're extremely uninfluential cabinet secretaries. This just speaks to a malaise in the American administration, the like of which we haven't seen for a long time. I think you go back to Jimmy Carter to find something as incompetent as this.
Yeah, you're spot on, Greg. It's not just a failure of the Oval Office, and we have seen that before, but it's a failure of the Pentagon and the broader system, the administration, the machine that sits around a president. And it's a terrifying portent of what's ahead, I suspect, particularly in relation to China. As always, Greg Sheridan, great to get your analysis. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Peter. Great to be with you.